She was born as Fawzia Azim in a conservative village in Punjab, Pakistan, but the world came to know her as Qandeel Baloch. From the beginning, Qandeel was different. Fierce, outspoken, and unwilling to be silenced. She grew up in a culture where women were expected to remain invisible, but she had other plans. With nothing but her voice and a cheap phone camera, she began posting bold, defiant videos, online videos that quickly went viral and turned her into a household name. People called her Pakistan's Kim Kardashian, but she was more than that. She was a woman tearing through the fabric of shame, challenging patriarchy and calling out the hypocrisy of a society that celebrated male fame but shamed female freedom. With each post, she wasn't just gaining attention, she was gaining enemies. Religious clerics, politicians, and even members of her own family began to condemn her. But Qandeel didn't stop. She refused to hide. She refused to be small. She once said, "I am a fighter, and I will keep fighting." Little did she know, her fight would make her a symbol, and ultimately a target. Her journey from village girl to viral icon was just the beginning of a story that would shake the nation. As Qandeel's fame surged, so did the backlash. Her videos dancing, lip-syncing, speaking boldly about female desire broke every unspoken rule of what a respectable woman should be in Pakistani society. She flirted with taboo, challenging religious clerics and mocking the double standards that kept women silent. She wasn't just entertaining, she was provoking, and that made her dangerous. She received thousands of death threats. Her social media was flooded with hate, but she didn't back down. In fact, she became even louder. She called out celebrities, exposed hypocrisy, and even posted a selfie with a famous cleric that caused national outrage. Suddenly, she wasn't just a social media star, she was a threat to the status quo. Every bold move she made lit up the media, and every headline came with more criticism, more pressure, and more danger. Yet she kept going, on trying to change the thinking of people, she once said. But what no one saw behind the camera was the fear she lived with daily. She changed her location constantly, received threats from her own family, and began to realize that her life was no longer just hers. Qandeel was no longer just a woman online, she had become a battleground between progress and patriarchy. On the night of July 15, 2016, the world went silent for Qandeel Baloch. In a rented house in Multan while she slept, the person she trusted most became her executioner, her own brother. Mohammed Wasim drugged her, then strangled her to death. In cold blood, no struggle, no mercy, just silence. The news broke like a shockwave across Pakistan and beyond. The girl who had dared to defy everything family, religion, tradition had been silenced in the name of honor. Wasim proudly confessed on national TV. "She brought shame to our family," he said, with no remorse in his eyes. In that moment, Qandeel's murder became more than just a family tragedy. It became a symbol of the brutal cost of female defiance. She had been
Ted Bundy's first arrest should have ended everything, but instead, it only marked a horrifying turning point in a story that still sends chills. Through true crime history, in 1975, when Bundy was finally linked to multiple attempted kidnappings, investigators thought they had stopped a violent predator. But behind bars, Bundy remained in control. Even in custody, he had a way of manipulating people, charming guards, studying his own legal case, and buying time. He refused to confess, never hinted at guilt, and then he did something that shocked the world. He escaped. It was June 1977. Bundy had been held in a Colorado jail, but during a court visit, he asked to access the law library to work on his defense. They granted it, and Bundy, ever the planner, took advantage. Alone in the library, he jumped from a second-story window and vanished. For 6 days, he lived in the woods, survived on scraps, and hitchhiked. But he was recaptured. The public breathed a sigh of relief. He was locked up again. What no one expected was that Bundy had another plan, more daring and dangerous than the first. By December 1977, he had starved himself down enough to fit through a hole in the ceiling of his jail cell. While guards thought he was asleep under blankets, Ted Bundy had already crawled through the ceiling, broken into an apartment above, changed clothes, and vanished into the cold Colorado night. This time, he was gone for good. He had money, stolen identification, and a plan. He was heading south to Florida. Bundy arrived in Tallahassee in early January 1978, blending into a student-heavy neighborhood using the alias Chris Hagen. No one knew who he was. He enrolled at a local university gym, wandered freely, and soon, the predator in him reawakened. On January 15th, just weeks after arriving, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in the dead of night. Armed with a log, Bundy crept through the house like a phantom. In less than 15 minutes, he brutally attacked for women, to died, to survived but were left permanently scarred, physically and emotionally. The attack was vicious. There was no time for anyone to react. Bundy then left the house and attacked another student just a few blocks away. Again, she survived. Barely. These weren't calculated, quiet killings. This was rage. This was chaos. This was a man out of control, no longer hiding behind charm or deception. But Bundy wasn't finished. On February 9th, just 3 weeks later, he abducted 12-year-old Kimberly Leach from her school in Lake City, Florida. He lured her from class and murdered her in cold blood. This would be his final crime. Days later, on February 15th, Bundy was pulled over by police in Pensacola, Florida. His car was stolen. He tried to flee but was caught. Fingerprints confirmed what the officer couldn't believe at first. They had just arrested Ted Bundy. Now the law caught up. The trial that followed was a national sensation. For the first time, America watched a serial killer defend himself in court, smiling, cracking jokes, cross-examining witnesses, even flirting with the judge. Cameras rolled as he denied everything, despite overwhelming evidence. Bite marks on victims, eyewitnesses, and stolen items found in his possession. Bundy treated the courtroom like a stage, never showing remorse, only performance. He proposed to his girlfriend during the trial, in court, and she accepted. The jury, however, saw the truth. He was found guilty of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death. Later, he would be convicted for the murder of Kimberly Leach as well. 3 death sentences hung over his head. But even after conviction, Ted Bundy wasn't finished playing games. For nearly a decade on death row, he gave interviews, shared stories, and slowly began confessing. It was clear he had murdered far more women than anyone knew. His official count is 30, but many believe it was much higher. Finally, on January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Outside, hundreds gathered, not to mourn, but to celebrate. They cheered. They lit fireworks. They held signs that said "Burn Bundy, burn." It was one of the few times the country agreed. Justice had been done, but Bundy's story didn't fade. Books, documentaries, films, they continue to explore the terrifying complexity of a man who had a monster behind a smile. He wasn't the monster under the bed. He was the monster you'd invite inside. And that's why, decades later,